Dr. Gomez, do we have a few people in the room?
Yeah, we only have a few. I can count them with my single hand with one of them. So not a lot, but hopefully they will keep coming. But like the last session, as it was stated, ended only around 15 minutes ago. So people may have gone on a break and they may join later. Either way. I'm not sure online. How does the setting look?
We have 3 people online and 4 in person, plus the speaker and the assistant.
Okay, why don't we start? And then if we hope that others will join us, otherwise we'll have a very in-depth conversation. So thank you so much for those of you who have joined us today in the room or virtually. And I hope this discussion will spark some interesting discussions for those who listen to this recording into the future. So we are going to discuss the state-of-the-art technologies that are emerging into the healthcare space. And this is globally. We are the Dynamic Coalition on Data-Driven Health Technologies. And we are hosted by the Internet Governance Forum. Now, what we will do in terms of our format is that we'll each just, I'm just changing the format as we go. We will each have the opportunity to make an intervention. Before that, I will request whoever our members on in our Dynamic Coalition to set the stage for us in terms of the work we have been doing. And I will also make a contribution to that. And then we'll go on to discuss what we think are the emerging issues, risks, challenges, benefits, and also the future vision that we see for artificial intelligence and robotics in healthcare. We have been listening to several sessions at EuroDIG and at WSIS, ITU, and so forth, about all kinds of issues that are emerging. It's a very new space to have artificial intelligence and robotics in healthcare, but we also can see tremendous benefits from doing so. We have a global population that is expanding, not necessarily for the EU, but the world is expanding. And the EU also has a tremendous opportunity to support healthcare, not just for the EU region, but globally. So we're going into the Summit of the Future in 2024. We are an absolutely critical element and area of development. And I think all governments, private sector, and so forth see this as being the future. We are one of the most heavily funded areas for global investment, and we're going to see that increasingly so. So we are really pitched to take off, and people are going to be doing that each in their own individual way. And we hope that with good discussions, we'll be able to harmonize some of the practices, not to restrain, but to promote quality healthcare for all. So I'm not sure if Yao is here, but I'm seeing one of our invited guests here. Dr. Gomez, would you mind giving an introduction to our work that we've been doing, if that's okay with you?
Sure. Well, I believe you can hear me, if that's correct. Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, like the Dynamic Coalition on Data-Driven Health Technologies, well, we are an iterative group, so we have members coming and going along the group over the past years. And the goal of this Dynamic Coalition is to create a space for informal debate on topics regarding healthcare globally. So over the past years, we've started not only with AI technologies, but also automation in the industry. I can shed some light in the future about this as well. But also currently we are in the advent of discussing the implementation of robotics in this specific sector in healthcare. And I can start by saying that we have been providing not only content for independence events that happen on this space. So as a Dynamic Coalition, either we get members that are selected to attend these sessions, Of course, we do this in our spare time. It's not a full-time job for anyone. It's just that we have an interest in this field, a willingness to debate and to eventually not only find problems, but also common ground and potential solutions for the issues that we see. In my particular case, I have a medical background. I'm Portuguese. I come from Portugal. I practiced for a single year after getting my degree. You can look at my face and see that I'm quite young. I jumped straight into the field of healthcare technologies, digital health. So currently, I'm practicing with AI technologies for patient triaging. It is a space where there's definitely a very high amount of regulation. It is definitely one of the difficulties of currently using large language models for healthcare as a whole, for providing not only diagnostics, but also decision-making tools for the patients. So ideally, we have a technology that starts from a database that incorporates only validated medical research, and then we are able to bridge that gap towards providing a solution to our patients. So what we do in our company is that we provide a solution. So it's a mobile app that is freely available for the users. It's called Ada Health, in case you want to research it and then try it yourself, since it's free. But then we also integrate this system, obviously with other add-ons, into healthcare providers and into a different space that we can actually use these sort of tools in. And at the end of the day, we are able not only, we don't generate diagnosis. So this is important to state also on a legal level, because that would require other type of regulation in terms of medical device. We are certified, but our main goal is not to generate a diagnosis. It's also to classify the patient based on the advice level. So what we want to do with this automation stage is to drop out the one-to-one ratio and the one-to-one relationship of patients when they are being assessed or triaged by a nurse in an hospital or by an healthcare professional. In Portugal, it's the case of a nurse, but it could be different or a different sort of healthcare professional in other countries. And we end up integrating this tool into the patient journey. So the patient, instead of going directly to medical care or seeking that medical care, it's actually a possibility that the patient starts with our digitalized tool. Then it's the door into the healthcare system in the collaborators and clients that we are working with. So the patient inputs their symptoms, and then the only part where the AI enters, it's not in defining what's the diagnosis. It's in defining what's the next best question to be asked to that patient. And this is all reasoning that is maintained by medical professionals in the backlog. So what I ended up doing after a medical degree was actually to start programming and to provide content for this backlog of information, for the database. And this is also one of the important aspects and potential risks of AI, which is that we need to take into account that the decision-making process in this healthcare space should be somehow monitored or leveraged by people that work in the industry already. This would be the natural thought process. But then if we look at AI technologies as they are being used right now, this is not always how it happens. We just spark from a very big database, and then we try to create reasoning based on a database that is not necessarily medically validated. So when we program, we take into account only articles that are available, not just with impact factor papers, but they are scientifically sound for us. And then we try to, not that we try, we actually convert that unstructured language of a text into data, so into code that is then used to classify the patients based on that reasoning. So the patient inputs the symptoms, they get asked questions, they can still state if they have more or less symptoms, but after that, that's where the reasoning software starts functioning. So the software asks the patient, what are the symptoms are they experiencing, attributes that relate to those symptoms, and potential risk factors. So we follow this thought of line of a risk factor influencing a potential condition. So for example, hypertension influences my probability of having a stroke. If I have a stroke, for example, I will not move half of my body. I will have a hemiparesis, for example, which would be a symptom. But then we can also classify this hemiparesis with attributes. It can have started today and it has lasted one day. It could have been lasting for the whole month. And these different answers nudged us towards a different diagnosis in the end. This is how the medical reasoning works. And we try to convert that into a software that is actually able to do this automatically. And at the end of the day, obviously there are concerns with this sort of systems. The main one, I would say that it's not legal, but accountability. So who's responsible for the outcome that we nudge the patients to? So, and that's why we don't intend and we don't classify ourselves as a diagnostic tool. We are not. We are just the initiation stage of the patient journey. So after a patient does this assessment, he then is told potentially that he can stay home. It can be safe for the patient to stay home or to self-medicate potentially. And then we provide, again, all the medical information that is provided is moderated by medical professionals. We have it in several different languages that are possible to be explored. Or if it's actually an emergency case, while we state emergency, you should head to the emergency facilities or care at the moment. And then obviously we have intermediate levels that can nudge the patient towards primary care, towards a more low level or more baseline level of care. And that's how we function at the end of the day. And this is where the value for the providers is being added. It's in this first stage. The patients, in the end, that need medical care, they will see a medical doctor. But it's that we allocate the right patient to the right resources. We have a problem that is systematic in Portugal with a number of patients that go to emergency facilities. Healthcare is free in Portugal. And this is something that is shared with other countries as well. And there is the incentive publicly for patients not to directly go to emergency care, but they end up doing so. And emergency facilities are for emergent cases or urgent cases. And it's not widely known or accepted in the population that this statement should prevail as it is, unfortunately. All the patients that step into the emergency room door, they have to be seen by someone. They cannot be refused. I can still say, okay, this patient should not be here, but at the end of the day, I cannot refuse treatment. I need to treat him on the spot or to provide some sort of answer or solution, even if it is go back to primary care. So again, we are still wasting resources on two sides. It's the time that one spends in the emergency care facilities, and also the time that another doctor, another colleague will spend in primary care assessing that same patient. So these sort of technologies, obviously they fall, I do consider that they fall into the scope of robotics, mostly automation. They are not necessarily here to replace jobs. They are here to promote the process of the patient journey itself and to make it more seamless at the end of the day. Obviously, I do believe in the value of what we do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing that. Many critics can be made, and that's also where the interesting part lays. It's that not everything is a beautiful sea of roses, and in an ideal world, we would be able to do it automatically, but also to have the human component to support the patient when it's needed. This was definitely also one of the issues, because at the end of the day, the patient is determining how the algorithm is going to work and the reasoning, since it's he or she introducing the input for the system. So at the end of the day, if patients do manipulate the system in the way that they go to healthcare facilities that are more high level in terms of emergency, they can also use these systems in a similar fashion. If there's no triaging process in the beginning that nudge them towards telling the truth. At the end of the day, we trust what the patient says. It has to be that way. And we treat the patient based on that and on what we see. And yeah, this is just one of the potential integrations of AI in this process. There are more. Also focus on treatment. There's an interesting, I'm not sure if I'm like taking too long. Feel free to interrupt me, Emily, in case there are other members also available and wanting to talk. But I just wanted to shed some light on an interesting project I saw in Germany regarding this, which was in the case of patients with cancer, towards which there's no direct treatment or available direct treatment according to guidelines. They would use AI to predict what could potentially be the most effective treatment based on similar cases. And even though this is not stating the exact diagnosis, this is not stating the exact treatment for the patient, but at least it's bringing us closer to the right answer. And I think that this is also a good step or a step in the right direction. I know that they were also having issues integrating this into healthcare systems themselves, because for this you need data, and healthcare data is not something that we can use freely or that it's freely available. This is also another ethical concern that we do have. So regarding not also how data is stored, where it's stored, but also how it's used and how we can process it. Are the systems interoperable? Is there a common language that we can use to retrieve data from one hospital and then compare it to data from another hospital? Because often what happens is that each hospital has their own system, or each provider has their own system, and there's no common ground linking these two. And there's a lot of potential manual work in the process. So we're adding, instead of actually removing the burden, we're actually adding more burden, more layers to this process of defining what's the next best step for that patient. And then we can ask ourselves, well, couldn't a doctor do this without having to use a system that predicts this automatically and wasting time integrating data in the process? Maybe there's a paper on this that one can access. Maybe there's common reasoning already available scientifically. So there are a lot of questions. And I do draw a line between what's adding value and what's a gimmick, because I know that many of these technologies, they do exist. I do think that they potentially can provide value in the future, but they are not yet there. And it's also something that we need to acknowledge in this process. It takes time. Yeah, not all of these technologies are going to be providing value to our end user. They may be, they may have efficacy, but not efficiency at the end of the day. So there are other ways also of solving the same issue, and technology is not always the answer for those. Yeah, and I finish on this low level, but unfortunately sad line also for the topic that we are discussing, because I would say that I should be more uplifting, but still I'm very judgmental. Even though I work in the space, I ask a lot of questions, and I think it should be that way for the ones who are on our side as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gomez. So I'm going to change the structure that we have that we had planned on. And I'm first going to ask Dr. Mohammed Subir, who's also a member of his own dynamic coalition, to introduce himself and to please share perspectives from their coalition. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Mohammed Shabir, as Amali introduced. Thank you very much, Amali, and everyone for the introduction. I am a member of Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability. The domain of this dynamic coalition is to make Internet Governance Forum and its associated forums accessible for people with disabilities, not just in the physical domain, but in the virtual domain as well. DCAD has been functioning for the last so many years. I think it's one of the oldest, earliest dynamic coalitions that were established at the IGF forum. I currently serve as its coordinator. We are revising at present at the dynamic coalition. We are revising the governance documents of DCAD. And also we are trying to establish some researches, because as new technologies, new data emerges, and the technology moves into, the internet moves into the domain of IDNs and stuff like that, robotics are coming up, AI is enhancing, IoT is being improved every day. So is the accessibility and the issues that people with different kind of impairments face. And those impairments become into disabilities when they are unable to use these online interfaces and environments. They are unable to exploit the potential of these forums for the benefits. They are unable to use these forums as they are to be. Not just that, but sometimes they are made vulnerable due to the lack of accessibility at these forums. For instance, I think I should give examples here which most of the people could relate. You would more often than not see a human testing option, which is thing called CAPTCHA. And it's not been here. It's there for a number of years. There are options as well. So a visually impaired person would not be able to see and enter CAPTCHA on their own. There are alternate ways of providing audio CAPTCHAs. There are also options of providing questions where people can answer, people can put in the answer and they can fill in the forms and testify that they are actual humans interacting with the computer, and it's not just the computer interacting with computer. But more often than not, developer in their ignorance or for their own ease forget to or opt to not include the alternate of CAPTCHAs in their websites, in their forums. And this makes people with vision impairment, those forums inaccessible. In the same way, when we talk about health and these issues, data we all know here is health-related data. They are the most sensitive and private ones. And when they are not accessible, people with vision impairment, if they cannot access their own data, they cannot read their own reports, they have to go to somewhere, they have to get someone's assistance to read those reports and documents. And by the fact that they were forced due to the inaccessibility of the forums or inaccessibility of the reports, those were driven somewhere because they are not accessible. So they have to go to someone and their privacy is violated. No matter how much you trust to someone, but you have to compromise on your privacy. Perhaps someone would object to my using this expression of the privacy being violated because it was your trusted person with whom you consulted your reports other than your own doctor or someone like that. But I would still argue that this is something that needs to be considered when we develop these kind of technologies. The accessibility needs to be at the center of any kind of development. I would be open to the questions, but I will finish with the point that accessibility impairments, these are not just the issues of persons who come from developing countries. They may be faced in even the well-developed countries as well. Had this not been the case, the White House would not be sued for making its presentations inaccessible for people with disabilities in 2021 and 2022 as well. So just to mention, this point is just to highlight that the disability and impairments are universal. They can catch anyone, anytime, anywhere, in any geographic region, and at any time of the frame in their age. This could be in the youth, this could be in the adults, and as we all age, we all know that our faculties would not be as good as they used to be. So the population of this population that face these kind of issues is increasing day by day, and if we do not start working on these issues right now, we would be creating problems for ourselves. And every developer, any person who is working with data, who is working with interfaces, who is working with different forums, be online or offline, that interacts with the public, they have a responsibility to ensure that these forums and these platforms, they are accessible and usable for everyone at the same time, same way and manner, and also at the same cost, because accessibility for people with disabilities comes more often than not at a much higher cost. And this cost and these issues, they magnify and amplify when it comes to people with disabilities in the developing part of the world. And if we want an environment, if we want a world where everyone is included, we have to focus on these issues. I stop here. If there are any questions, I would be more than welcome to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, absolutely critical area that as we develop new technologies, that we must include everyone. So I am just going to go to two other members of our coalition, please, for short interventions, and then we will open the floor to any one of you, and we really hope that you will share with us your concerns and your beliefs and your vision for the future. So I'm just going to call in Yao, please, to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Amali. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you.
Yes, we can.
I think I can share my screen now. Okay, I'll share my screen. Okay. So, thank you. And I would like to just take 3 minutes to talk about the perspective of the dynamic coalition on data-driven health technology. As you are all aware, we are in the forefront of the dialogue surrounding integration of robotics and AI in healthcare, making the dynamic coalition a valuable interlocutor in the rapid evolving field. Our mission is to facilitate multi-stake dialogue on health, mobile health, medical Internet of Object things, and we are aligning seamlessly with this session focusing on robotics and AI and how robot can assist with patient care, surgery, research, and more. So the dynamic coalition emphasis on knowledge sharing, open communication, and collaboration is critical in answering this session question about the optimal ecosystem to accelerate data-driven health technology, and our work in identifying key issues such as universal telemetric access and data privacy standards and AI ethics provide a foundation for discussion on how we can build back stronger and faster post-pandemic and what practical practices should be pursued and discarded based on medical experience and during COVID pandemic. The coalition vision for 2023 focused on robotics and medical Internet of Things, and directly address these sessions exploration of how robots and how robots can model life, emulate persons and processes, and enhance health technologies. Our policy focused on specific issues for the MIOT, diversity and inclusion, the IT ethics for medical application developers, provide insights into how robots can help make it right to balance the imbalance of access to medical service and support equalization and also collaboration between communities. So I also finally want to stress that our commitment to addressing issues such as data collection and sharing standard, misinformation, and security is pivotal in discussing the vulnerabilities of citizens using mobile IoTs and medical IoTs, wellness devices, and robotics for health technology transactions. But also, provide a roadmap for discussion on securing the internet for a quality medical Internet of Things, and whether a dedicated, secured, fast speed quality internet for the medical Internet of Things should be established. And that's it. Also, to summarize, I would say our work and action are not only significant, but are also indispensable in navigating the new age of healthcare. We if you allow me, I also want to stress out some of the key reflection in terms for the perception of perspective of this our dynamic coalition on this topic. If you will take a look at our mission statement, we clearly state how we facilitate the multi-stakeholder dialogue on the topic of internet and EL, and also the mobile app, internet, medical app things, well-being, diversity, and technology. We aim at seeking common ground and values, principles, ethics, norms, culture, standard, best practices, and so forth, you name it. We believe that knowledge sharing and open communication between multi-stakeholders with collaboration, assistance, innovation, and can deliver quality health care and produce and services. The key issues we have identified is the list demonstrates, of course, insight into health technology space and matter for reflection for the development of the internet. This includes for us universal telematic access, standard for individual data privacy, interoperability, security of artificial intelligence and machine learning models, ethics for computer science, misinformation, disinformation, collaboration, data collaboration collection, and standard. Also, data sharing standard, access to device, and among other things. So, in terms of recommended policy focus items from our report of 2022, we have recommended several topics area that will benefit for further discussion for policymakers. This includes specific issue for medical Internet of Things and diversity, inclusion, access and accessibility, IT ethics for medical application developers, artificial intelligence application issue, bias and misinformation, standard setting for medical application and ethics, and human rights in medical context. So, and our vision for 2023 is the focus area for discussion in robotics and medical Internet of Things. The dynamic coalition expects to develop our dynamic coalition book on health matter technology driven changes in health care, community of thoughts about health care also, and the book will provide a broader and holistic view on health matter, current and emerging trends about healthcare, mobile healthcare and e-healthcare. So we also have a specific interest in identifying out-of-box issues and potential disruptions and so forth. And we can also assist with, we will also work on assisting with risk management and future oriented discussion, making future oriented discussion looking for internet policy. So these are a few comments and perspectives I would like to share with you. If you have any comment and question, we are open to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yao. Thank you very much for sharing with everyone here the work that we do. I just want to find out, is Ricardo in the room, please? Dr. Gomez, is Ricardo in the room?
I believe not. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So then I will transfer this to Frederick Cohen, who's also a member of our Dynamic Coalition, who will also share some words. And then after that, he will lead the public discussion. Thank you so much. Frederick, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, thank you for this invitation. I'm very honored today to join this conversation with you to this EuroDIG session. I think today what would be important is to comment the news on a financial talk, because what is ongoing now in Europe is an important meeting between the Prime Minister of China and the German and French leaders. The purpose of this talk would be the next summit for a new financial compact. That will be a meeting where he will assist with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and Ursula von der Leyen. It will be in France, and it's important because they are coming to change the future architecture of the financial institutions into the world. It's important because we can often say that we have seen the Prime Minister in China coming through a commitment with the major institution for financement. Then we have seen him have meeting with the head of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and we can say also it would be the World Organization of Trade and also the International Labour Organization. The two others are also important. It would be the Financial Stability Board and also the OECD.
Frederick, could I please ask you to focus on healthcare, please?
Okay, no problem. It's important because when we are talking for development for social workers, we need often to distribute our money and our energy between partners, and the focus on Europe would be a major issue. And then I think it's the same problem we had when we were ongoing with our newsfeed on Facebook. Then because it was doing a way to compare how we could manage with diplomacy in between different cultures. Then we can say that the topic of image is important for people to communicate, and others are really preferring sounding. So we have to adapt our device to many users, and then it would be important to find a solution to communicate, because the leaders have difficulties in between them because of the way satellites are set. We can also talk on the issue on weather balloon, which was a really important topic on medias, where we had to communicate beyond the medias with images and other meaning, which have to be set. So now I think this issue was also to be compared with the talk on global GDC, the Global Digital Compact, because for healthcare systems and medias, there are some connection we have to remark, and how adapt it into different ways is also important. So now healthcare systems are developing itself with the international communication and foreign affairs could develop mediation, because robotics are used in different way. And then I hope for the future of the UN campaign and with the sustainable development goals that all these systems are conformed and then could be seen. Thank you very much to everyone.
Okay, thank you, Frederick. Dr. Gomez, is there anyone? We'll take some comments, please, questions, opinions, anything. Please feel welcome to share as you wish on the topic of healthcare. Dr. Gomez, is there anyone in the room perhaps who would like to share with us?
Yeah, I can definitely ask that. Well, I'll second the request. If there's not, obviously I can provide some further input, but we're more than open to collect comments. Yeah, on this regard, if there's any interest in the room to do so. And I think if you speak, it's being captured at the moment by the microphone, so feel free to do so, take the floor, and yeah, we can even have an healthy discussion about even my points or more generic considerations about what we're doing at the moment. Yeah, obviously we come from different backgrounds, so it's always interesting to collaborate on that regard and to shed some light on different topics that are of interest. Yeah, even if they go a little bit outside the main topic of healthcare, but still there's always some bridging that can be done. So I don't know if anyone wants to make a statement.
I'm very intrigued about the topic, but I don't know that much about it, so that's why I'm attending the session. So I'm quite happy to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, awesome. No, I could even add further input also on other projects that are being run regarding. Well, I would like to emphasize a project called DIGAS. It's a German initiative, as we all know, or maybe not, but should potentially be aware. Is that Germany, and particularly healthcare in Germany, has not always been accounted for a very digitalized system. So a lot of the medical records are actually still in paper, or that transition is still happening. We can say that at least. And we see a lot of innovation coming directly from the countries themselves. In the case of Germany, there's a lot of inner innovation, but then there's a question where these technologies are being applied. And usually they are being applied in other markets. And of course, the American market is very open and welcoming to all of these technologies, also because of how the system is framed in terms of how private depending healthcare is. And that is certainly the case for many technologies. In the case of DIGAS, it's an interesting project. I don't know if people in the room know that. It's a project about prescribing medical apps for treating conditions instead of actually prescribing medicines. So this was an initiative from Germany. It is being replicated in other countries. I know that Emmanuel Macron already 2 years ago mentioned that something similar would happen. There's a framework that is being developed for this purpose, but other countries were actually able to go ahead, even though they were not the first ones saying we want to replicate this. It was the case of Belgium as well. And but there's still the underlying question. And again, my criticism, doubts, and questions, which is, are we actually being more effective with this sort of technologies? Are we actually providing more value than with traditional so-called medicines? This because for a technology to be approved and incorporated in the so-called directory for these technologies in Germany, they need to have a trial that validates the results. But then we ask ourselves, who is running the trial? And most of the times it's the companies themselves. So if we actually spend some time and with scientific reasoning going through some of these trials, there are definitely question marks regarding the outcomes and the framework, especially of the methodology, because it's in the methodology stage that we either showcase that we are totally independent or that we are nudging results towards a wanted result. And at the end of the day, I think there's already some reports coming out on this regard, the economical advantages of having this prescription, also because it's not, it's still pricey. That's also the question that stands. Some of these technologies, they function on a subscription base and per patient, and they are still quite pricey compared to regular medicines. So again, I ask myself, aren't we just nudging towards gimmicks, or are we actually nudging towards solutions that are effective for our users? I'm not saying that all of them are not, and thankfully so. Otherwise, that would be not just a waste of time, but also resources of the ones who develop the policy. But it's actually a stimulus for companies to do so. Unfortunately, what we are seeing is that companies are specializing in developing DIGAS because they see a potential for profitability that is supported by the state, which is not normal in this sort of technologies. You need to prove your value before you actually are able to get funding and returns. And it's not necessarily the case with some of these technologies. Of course, you need to prove the value scientifically, but then there's a lot of question marks that are being raised along the way. And there's also a fast track process that was established within this policy framework of around 12 months for these technologies to be implemented in the market and validated. And even if they are not taken into account at the end of those 12 months, if they are retracted, they are still during that period able to be tested and prescribed. Obviously, no one develops a technology for it to be there for 12 months only, but it allows for these thoughts and other providers and companies to come into the market and say, okay, for 12 months, I'll provide something that is not really, it's just a product that we have in our backlog, but let's test it out. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't, it's still there for 12 months. It's free marketing as well. So why not? And then yet again, there's also the stimulus for the prescription of these tools, because one would think, okay, if it is slightly cheaper, we want to nudge the medical professionals towards prescribing these tools. And how do they do it in Germany? They replicate the same process that happens in pharmaceutical industry. So there's a financial stimulus towards the doctor. This doesn't happen visibly, obviously, with regular medicines. There's scientific reasoning behind the decisions of the one who is prescribing. But there's also the stimulus for prescription through financial incentives, which again, questionable and raises the concerns. Is this economically viable as a technology per se, as a policy measure per se? I do believe in it as a framework, but there's definitely more regulation that should be leveraged or created around it itself. Still, it was the first initiative. It was a very good initiative, in my opinion. It was innovative, at least. And I think that many of the countries that are replicating these policies are actually learning from the mistakes, and they are not doing exactly or establishing exactly the same framework. And again, the example of Belgium, I believe that Denmark is developing a similar framework at the moment, but very different in this sort of reimbursement scheme, which is exactly where, for me, the potential value or not is for this sort of technologies. So yet again, a lot of questions that are still raised and not a lot of answers. I think we also lack a lot of research economically on these technologies, because we do have a lot of studies comparing medicines that we can take for any condition, but we don't really have a lot of independent studies comparing medicines or the best care possible to or against these technologies. Usually they are driven by the companies themselves, and we know what this could potentially mean in the end. I want to state, obviously, we can also be impartial when being part of a company and developing a study, but it all comes down to understanding the methodology and potentially replicating methodology that is already established out there, and not just developing it ourselves from scratch. So yeah, it's obviously a lot of concerns in this space. Again, I come back to the original statement. I'm still confident in the value. That's why I'm in this space at the moment. I just like to question myself along the way, so that in the end we can nudge ourselves and leverage the actual value of these technologies, more than just saying, I have the newest robot in my hospital, or I have the newest app on my phone, if it's actually not providing value to the user. So at the end of the day, some considerations of mine on this topic.
Thank you, Dr. Gomez. I just want to add there that I think there are sort of two areas. I'm coming from just an ordinary citizen, patient perspective. And we hear, especially with COVID, what happened, it was wonderful for us as users that we went to telemedicine. And we have a great opportunity to learn from that, and we can leverage that very well, I think. There's one side also I want to state, the operational side, the paper flow management side. And there's also what Dr. Gomez has been talking about in the actual medical application side. And on the paper side, I'm a business person as well. We found a lot of doctors were really getting tired with dealing with a lot of paper miscommunications, the speed of collaboration, perhaps between specialists and hospitals and pharmacies and so forth. And there's a tremendous opportunity for healthcare to develop these facilities for, to have seamless data sharing, of course, privacy concerns, but, data sharing to speed up the efficacy of these healthcare systems. And this could also mean that sometimes we find that with burnout of doctors, for instance, in various countries, And the opportunity for patients to see a specialist in a timely manner, for instance, is slowed down. So we can probably speed up service by some of these business aspects of healthcare as well. So it's a very important area, and I do believe there's a lot of investment going into that side of technology, and that concurs with what Dr. Gomez was also talking about, triaging and so forth. So now I see Mr. Ricardo Holmquist online, and I'd like him, please, for his viewpoints, if he's able to share a little bit from his perspective, and please, could you introduce yourself as well? Thank you. Thank you, Ricardo. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Emily. I'm very, very sorry I missed the hour. I just noticed that the hour was in the Finland time and not in the Central time. So I missed most of the hour. Very sorry for that. I was trying to get a solution on what you mentioned in your paper, in the convocatory for this meeting, trying to get a solution for remote medical robots, and I understand this will be a solution not only for European countries, but also for undeveloped countries, because in this way you can perform an operation from anywhere in the world to a different place. And I was thinking that putting a different network is kind of difficult. And you see that from the point of view of the universities, they have different networks in the different regions. You have an European network in Europe, and a European network in Latin America. I don't know in the rest of the regions, but it was kind of difficult to have a different network. So I was thinking that maybe a solution for this is to have a different numeration, or not a different numeration, but a set of numbers on the IPv6 numbers dedicated to this kind of operations. So you can have, I don't know, a commitment for all the ISPs, and basically, and especially from the telcos, to have a priority for these networks. I understand that right now, in countries like Spain, they have performed remote 5G operations. Or they tested it. So I understand with a 5G through a cellular line, you can do this. So if you have enough priority, and this priority can come from a set of IPv6 numbers that have the priority for the ISPs, for this, for the telco companies, will be a kind of solution to have the speed needed for these robotic operations to be performed remotely. This is one set of the game. The other one is this goes against all net neutrality that, for example, in ISOC, we have been fighting for. So any telco with this kind of commitment will say, hey, but if I do this for the robotic operation, I will go against, I don't know, I will do the same for, I don't know, Netflix or Facebook or whoever that pays. So that's the setback for these kind of solutions. But I guess this is a kind of solution that involves ICANN, that involves telcos, and involves some kind of commitment. But at the end, with technologies like 5G and 5G plus and maybe 6G, we can perform in developed countries. For undeveloped countries, we only can have the expectative that they at some point they will have enough 5G connections to this. But I understand electricity and water came first than 5G for some countries. But that's from my point of view. Thank you, Amalie, for the invitation. This is my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. So Ricardo is the chair of EuroLO, and he's on the board of ICANN. Thank you very much for your intervention there, Ricardo. I just want to bring in climate here at this stage, because a number of countries were experiencing various extremes of climate. There's also things like earthquakes. I think there'll be increasing things like tornadoes and floods and so forth. And speaking as you did, Ricardo, on net neutrality and so forth, I think in times of crisis, there is definitely an ability, I think, to focus on people undergoing lots of duress. And I think perhaps we can start there and have some priority for healthcare. It's sort of like a e-health. It's a technology, Médecins Sans Frontières kind of concept that we could perhaps have into the future. So I'm very optimistic for that, and hope that can be provided into the future to support our humanity, wherever these crises may take place. Now, I'd like, please, if there can be a show of hands for anyone who may like to intervene. First, going to go online. Is there somebody who would like to intervene? Please, if you could put your hand up or just unmute yourself and speak, please. Okay, Dr. Gomez, is there anyone else there from the floor who might want to share?
I believe, yeah, we have an intervention here from the floor. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for this, and sorry for the silence, but the room is really not really well filled. I think the matter you're working on is very, very interesting and important. Just earlier this morning, there was also a meeting of the Dynamic Coalition on Internet of Things. Some things that came forward from that were, well, it's looking for global good practice, and then transparency, real transparency, meaningful transparency, and accountability came as main factors for those who are involved in the field. Accountability attributed to where in the value chain you contribute, and last but not least, also choice, that it's not locked-in by certain producers. And what came up in the discussion was also that the user can influence what happens. So these elements are more general, but if you apply them to this part, I can see that there's a lot of values in keeping these principles. So that's the first one. I really think it's good to keep track and keep things together. The other thing is, particularly on the discussion we had last also, for instance, application of the duress, it's also deployment in underserved regions that seems to value this. I mean, in an ideal world, you would have access to the right medical care at any moment in time. We know now with more and more people in the world and more diseases and things, that's impossible. So IoT and robots, no doubt, will be needed to deal with it. But also specifically in those regions where they can't afford high investments, how can this be alive? Is there any focus of that in this group? Because I'd love to learn from that. I think there's a lot of value in doing something like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure, Emily, if you want to address these last points particularly. Can you hear us? If not, I'll then jump in with some comments.
She's just unmuted.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Dr. Gomez, go ahead, please. Yes, go ahead.
No, I was going to shed some light on this topic because I think it overlaps very well, like with the discussion that you had earlier, not just with the fact of accountability, but also accessibility that links well to this topic. And one important aspect is precisely that, which is even though yeah, the technology would provide definitely more value in regions that don't really have access to the resources. And it's mostly through partnerships that I see that this could potentially be established, and through understanding that even though we are from a rich country, we are also accountable for those who didn't have the same opportunities as us. I can give you the example, indeed, like with common ground and common goals and a foresight that is global and not just local. And I was going to give you an example of an initiative that we also developed within the company. We actually have one of our languages, which we don't have a lot, but one of them is Swahili, because we wanted to provide our tool in the specific case of Tanzania. And we developed an initiative with a partner in the pharma industry that supported and funded the project, actually aligned also with the social needs and investments that they wanted to make at that time, but they saw in us the potential to provide value in a particular region. And at the end of the day, obviously there's also the question, but then locals in Tanzania, do they have a cell phone that they can use to actually access and use these technologies? That's also another of the topics. What we ended up doing is that we adapted our tool to the specific requirements of the region. So instead of it being mobile focused, it's focused on computers that actually stand in an hospital. It's not focused necessarily on patients as the input providers, but on local doctors as trying to remove the burden of the local system. So we try to adapt the value chain or the value proposition to the local setting. And I think most of the times this is where the potential positive aspects can come from, because we can talk about, as earlier it was mentioned, robotics and surgeries at a distance, but then if we don't have the skills on both sides to operate whichever tools needs to be there, even if the surgeon is in a highly developed country, we'll still need to have the robots in the end destination being maintained at least by the local individuals. So it's a matter also of leveraging the capability on both sides. It's not just about setting up the scene, putting a Da Vinci robot for a fancy surgery that we can connect via 5G. Maybe there's not even 5G infrastructure in the destination country or region, which is, these questions should always be made before we actually think about introducing technologies. And yet again, it's a matter of reaching the right stakeholders. Even if we frame it as, okay, it's a social intervention, in the end, as long as we provide value, it's perfectly fine. Even if it is what I meant, a social placement, which is not ideal, because I think that globally the investment should be made solely based on goodwill, but not everyone is driven only by goodwill. So even if it is social placement or marketing from companies, well, as long as the value is there and it's provided, I'm happy that it is being done and applied. So, but yet again, as you said, it's difficult to leverage this gap. It's not just a gap of technology, it's also a gap of resources to apply the technology in these places. And thank you for the intervention.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. That's very good. And I just want to touch back on the remote technology. We will be actually hosting an event at IGF Tokyo, and we are expecting to have speakers who are working in medical space in outer space. So I hope you will all join us for that. We're finding that remote technologies are actually very important for very large countries that have space, where there are issues of equalization and providing equal medical support to just a country's population, where city centers can have state-of-the-art medical services, but then in remote areas, such as with the Sami, for instance, there will be that gap of provision of medical service. So I think there is a lot of interest in developing, but as Dr. Gomez has said, there is that need to have the facilities and the technologists and the medical support actually to run these services. But sometimes, we've heard of stories where it's difficult to transport a patient. Perhaps that can be pop-up medical centers where, some specialists can fly in, but not everybody, and so forth. So, these are these are hopes and wishes to have sort of equal medical care for everybody, which we hope, that technology can support. So here's my little spiel there. We'll go back to, is there anyone online who would like to share with us, please?
I think that in the room, we also had an intervention in here.
Okay,
so maybe we can start from here. Yeah.
If they can please give their name and affiliation, that would be appreciated.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm from Tallinn University of Technology, and I'm interesting. I once wrote a thesis about Internet of Things, just Internet of Things, not medical, and it was more about security aspect. So I'm interested about security challenges and how we dealt with them in medical Internet of Things. Maybe in that you're developing, or maybe just in the field. Maybe some examples. Yeah. Please specify.
Emily, I'm not sure if you want to address it.
I'll just, address it from very high level. We have actually started to work with the Dynamic Coalition on security and so forth at IGF, and we are hearing large numbers of hackers, hacking into medical services, and yes, it's a tremendous concern. That's all I have to say, that we are very interested, and if there is somebody who would want to share, who's on this call, we welcome you to share with us as well. Any work.
I can step in as well on this topic.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, like, your question reminded me of a project I once was developing, of actually trying to leverage through AI and security video camera, CCTV cameras in emergency wards. The behavior of the patients and, for example, potential infection routes within a medical ward. And it all seemed very pretty on paper, but then we came to the realization that it was potentially raising these concerns about, is it even allowed to collect images from CCTV inside medical wards? And so the project was developed throughout the span of 2 weeks, to then come to the realization that there was a burden already based on this question only. We then realized that there was some markets that were actually willing to develop this. So some of the colleagues from the team, they were from India. And in India, they just said, okay, this could be potentially established. Of course, there's also frameworks there. I'm not just saying that everything would be possible regarding medical data, but also sometimes it's also about mitigating it from the beginning. So if we don't generate the data, we won't have problems with data leakage or data privacy. And in the specific case of the European framework, it was established as such. So this is not possible. The concerns would not be about the system itself not working. It would be about, okay, we're generating these images, these data, where do we store it, and would it actually be safe? So this was the concern, and it was like the second step for the data usage. It was not the primary usage for the data. That would be the concerning aspect. It's also what potential mitigations may happen further down the line. So sometimes it's about making a hard cut right in the beginning and not even generating that data. Also, potentially, for example, having internal servers. This is also something common. Each one of the hospitals having their own server and not connected to the internet, but to the intranet of the locations themselves, of the hospitals, of the facilities. There's a potential mitigation for hacking, which can still happen. We had the case of this a few years ago in a private provider back in Portugal. And one of the ways that they found to potentially be able to address these issues in a more quick manner is to have their own InfoSec and data security team that is in-house and part of the group that they didn't necessarily, well, they did have before people working in this space, but it was not a dedicated team. And having dedicated people working on this, trying to mitigate all these issues could also potentially establish or close the breach between this burden. But yeah, but it's interesting to see that different regulations already nudge the countries and regions towards having data security or not from the get-go, because the threats are the same regarding hacking. It's just about what we are hacking and what the frameworks tell us that we need to have in place to comply, to be compliant. And there's a lot of frameworks that try to establish that those several layers of protection. But still, it's very variable, and even these regulations, they happen also at a local level. So when I say local, I mean per country as well, not just dependent on Europe. But still, it's a very interesting comment and consideration.
I think if you think of different aspects, it becomes more prevalent. I mean, for data access, that's true. Hacking is there, but for tampering during operations on distance, you don't want to have. So that's extra sensitivity. So
there is, for sure. This is also, I've never seen actually damages directly sparking, for example, from a connection in a Da Vinci surgery happening live, but this is a potential threat. And if someone wants to be noticed, as in many of these cases of hacking, as a stimulus for doing that, this could potentially be a place, unfortunately, that could be used to showcase this and to show how fragile the systems are in the end. So this is yet again one of the problems. It's about the low-level infrastructure, not about the technology. Because we can be debating technology all day, but it's about having the right frameworks in place regarding infrastructure and data security, data privacy as well. And the discussion can go both ways, I think. Amalie, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for detailing that out, Dr. Gomez. So are there any other comments from the floor there? I'm not seeing any hands up here.
Not in here, not physically.
Okay. So maybe we end a little early. We appreciate everyone who joined us today. And as I mentioned previously, we'll be hosting a session we expect to at IGF Kyoto. So it'll be also virtual as well as you can attend as well. And we are looking at these issues of remote technologies in supporting medical services and hopefully equalization for peoples. Europe is well placed to support, to fund and develop complex medical systems. And as we're coming from a dynamic coalition that's hosted at United Nations, we hope that benefit of development can then, reach out across to all peoples of the globe. And one thing we are experiencing is a tremendous rise in population. How can citizens globally be medically serviced? It takes a lot of commitment by the doctors, a lot of training and time to develop a doctor, to develop a nurse, and so forth. And I think the population is expanding much faster than this development of medical professionals. So I think as a result, a number of countries are moving to technology supporting them so that the medical staff's time is optimized. And as such, this is where sort of at the back end of the medical services, as I mentioned before, there's tremendous opportunity for investment, especially through governments, to develop these technologies. Obviously, lots of them will be supported and developed in the private sector. And there's a lot of funding, as I mentioned, going in. But as Dr. Gomez was saying, collaboration is absolutely critical. So going forth, what we're hoping is with this multi-stakeholder approach, we will be able to spark interest. And what we found is that not necessarily related entities are getting interested in supporting healthcare. And this could be through supermarkets, through bookstores, and so forth. Maybe they are service points. Maybe they have the background infrastructure to provide the service. And it's this innovation, which I think will be very helpful for European citizens, global citizens to access healthcare. And, we'll have the smart health going on that is easy accessible for citizens with 5G access, 6G access, but not necessarily accessible for remote areas. So these kinds of hubs provided by, say, a bookstore or a supermarket could be very, very interesting opportunity. And we hope, bringing together a number of diverse economic groups together, we will support the healthcare of citizens. But fundamentally, the health of a citizen is what is absolutely critical for a healthy country. So I just want to end there and just thank everyone for that. And I pass the floor back to Dr. Gomez for some final comments from on site. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try. I will definitely be keeping it very short. I can only emphasize that the challenges are many, and the discussions sometimes are one step higher than what they should be. So the discussion should sometimes be on the infrastructure aspect more than the technology itself, because I believe that at this stage we all agree that we already have the resources and technology in place or ready to be implemented, but they are not implemented because of gaps, and those gaps are where we should focus our attention in. But finishing on an up note, I also wanted to state that I do think that these technologies can help to close other gaps, social gaps mostly, that are currently in place, namely regarding accessibility to healthcare and quality healthcare as well. So once again, I would like to thank you, the ones who are virtually and also in the room, for joining the session. And hope to create further discussions and definitely being in touch with some of you. And that's it. Have a nice day. And we'll continue our discussions in the next sessions and also in the corridors and virtually. Thank you.
And thank you for our guests and their interventions. This is really very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you.